authenticity, such a buzzword. What does it mean to you?
Oh God, talk about a buzzword. It means a lot of things actually, but I think at the core, it means, or it should mean, being able to be your full and true and complete self everywhere that you go, all of the time, everywhere that you exist. I think the key is the idea of complete, because we have so many different parts of us that are all authentic and sometimes directly in opposition to each other, to themselves. And so it's finding a way to merge all of that and really be in synchronicity with yourself as you go through life, and as you navigate through all of the different worlds that we navigate through on any given day.
Yeah, that's that concept of like different parts of your identity being at conflict with each other is so fascinating. And actually is the reason why I named the company Plural or Plural, right? Like plural, it's the same word and it means the same thing in English, Spanish, and Portuguese, right? More than one, right? But I've always thought, especially going into like corporate, I always thought I had to be the singular version of myself because these
Right.
things that I saw, which are part of my identity, I saw it at conflict with professionalism. But then I was like, no, like you can be more than one, hence like bringing all of them together. So I'm fascinated that word conflict just stuck out to me. But for you, I'm wondering like what parts of your identity did you see at conflict with each other?
I mean, all of them. I mean, it's a part of existing, I think, for everyone, but especially for women and people of color and Latinas and so on. There are so many different versions of who you are supposed to be. And depending on the audience and where you are being at that moment, they are in direct contradiction, and you're constantly navigating, what is the truth? What is the truth about me? What is the truth about who I am supposed to be and what I actually am? And I think, part of the biggest challenge, I know this is a concept that's out there, and that when I first read it, it's so much stuck with me, because there's a truth to the idea that the problem with stereotypes, right, is that it's not so much the stereotype, it's the fact that it robs you of the ability to have a multifaceted self, right? That there's more to everyone than what one stereotype could possibly ever convey, and it sort of forces you into an identity that is not full, it's not the complete story. And that is a challenge that I don't think I have fully mastered. I don't think I ever will. I think it's part of life's journey, is moving through all of these different parts of who you are, the experiences, lived experiences that you've had throughout your life, and how you show up everywhere, and getting to a place where you are able to find, like I said, that synchronicity, or something as close to synchronicity as is possible in a lifetime. I'm nowhere near there, by the way. So, I'm not an expert, but it's something that I am super aware of, and um, and and talk about and deal with a lot, every single day.
Yeah, I mean the idea of stereotypes and even shoulds, I agree, they're so powerful because to your point, it kind of like puts us in a box around like, all right, if this is what I'm supposed to be, maybe I'll just lean into that. And
Right.
I think it starts really early too. Like
Yeah.
even when we're growing up, there are certain expectations of maybe what you should be as a Latina, as a woman. Talk to me about growing up. Like what were some of those
Yeah.
expectations you think were placed on you?
I think that's really funny, because that's exactly funny in a sad way, because I think that's exactly what happens to a lot of people. Like you hear a stereotype and you figure, oh, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. And so, to tie that back to your question, I had a really interesting um, experience, right? I sort of not the usual experience. I grew up in Washington Heights in New York City to Dominican parents. My mom came here when she was a very small child. So my mom was, for all intents and purposes, raised in what was at that time Spanish Harlem and is now the Upper West Side, 109 in Columbus. And my dad came here, in his late 20s. So already two very different things. My mom is super New York. My dad is super Caribbean island. And here we are. So I grew up in Washington Heights. I attended a private school in Riverdale, and I commuted every day between these two extremely different worlds that were really 20 minutes away from each other, and two really different universes. But even within my community of Washington Heights, there were differences, right? It's like, yeah, I am Dominican American. However, unlike most of my peers or friends in where we lived in my community and in my neighborhood, like both of my parents are college educated and had careers and their own businesses and so on, and were very much part of the fabric of the community for all of those reasons. And so I was kind of in the middle of these two really interesting worlds where I didn't really belong in either of them, right? So when I am in Washington Heights and I'm in the community, like I'm not really living the experience of most of the other children that are around me, whose moms are working, 2 to 3 jobs, and they're just trying to put food on the table. And a story that is so very, very common in my community. That was just not my experience. But then when I would get on, in my parents' car and they would drop me off at Riverdale every morning, I am now in a whole different universe where kids have chauffeurs that are dropping them off at school, and things like that were also extremely different from my experience. So I was sort of in these two universes that were both in some ways not fully right, if that makes sense. But what I realized, or what sort of started to happen, is that I got the sense that, okay, well, because I'm this Dominican New Yorker from Washington Heights, like I'm supposed to be like this. And I am supposed to wear Timberland boots, and I am supposed to, it's the 90s, right? So bear with me, right? I'm supposed to wear Timberland boots, and I'm supposed to wear like a puffy Columbia jacket, and I'm supposed to have red lipstick, and I'm going to do that because that's what I think I'm supposed to be like. And it was a total costume, because it's not really what I liked. And my parents were like, what the hell is going on?
So you
here?
Wait, so you did wear the costume though?
Oh, for a couple of years. I mean, because I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. I mean, and we're talking about youth, right? It was very hard to figure out where I belong. Like, am I part of this community? Am I part of that community? I don't seem to really fit in anywhere. I'm in Washington Heights, and everyone thinks, my family is rich because, we have a car, and we have a nanny, and whatever. And then I go to Riverdale, and everyone thinks, I must be like the poorest person in the universe because I'm Dominican and I'm from Washington Heights. So where is the truth? And the reality is, the truth was in the middle. The truth was a little bit of everything. The truth was a little bit of all of it, right? The truth is, I did not have the experience that most of my neighborhood friends and colleagues, and the truth is that I also didn't have the same experience that most of the students at my school had. The truth is that I had a little bit of all of it, right? And so it took a long, long time for that conflict to resolve itself for me. And it does start really, really early. I mean, it starts for me, it started like I started to become aware of it. I think, I know in kindergarten, when it was brought to the table for me. So
what happened in kindergarten?
It is an interesting concept.
What happened in kindergarten?
Well, kindergarten, I had this experience in kindergarten that forever changed my life. And I say that fully aware of how impactful that comment is, how deep that comment is. So I went to a private Catholic school also in Riverdale for kindergarten for a few of my elementary school years.
Oh, so Riverdale started early. I thought this was like high school that you started going to Riverdale.
No, I went to Catholic school in Riverdale until elementary school. And then I went to Riverdale Country School in 7th grade.
Got it. Okay.
So I was already, I was already at Riverdale well before high school. But for kindergarten, I was at this Catholic school that at the time actually doesn't exist anymore, but at the time was like 99% white. And I was the only, no, that's a lie. There was me and there was this one other Black girl. It was just her and I, the Black and brown girl, right? Political terms, that were in the kindergarten. And, it was an older school and it had the little wood chairs, and, we had a uniform and they had the buckles, and the kids sit, cross-legged and all kinds of ways. And so the chairs were significantly scratched because of the kids and the buckles on the shoes. But one day we were in the classroom and my teacher, who I will never forget, Sister Margaret Mary, who was a nun and was also our teacher, said to me, "You are the one, that's scratching the chairs. I know that it's you who is scratching the chairs because you are a Puerto Rican and everybody knows that Puerto Ricans carry knives. And this is probably what your parents are telling you to do." So I'm 5, right? And I'm telling you this because this has never left my mind. This has never left my mind. I had no idea what she was talking about. I didn't know what is a Puerto Rican. I didn't know if I was a Puerto Rican. I had no identity that was related to race or ethnicity at that point because I was 5. And because my parents were doing this Herculean job of keeping me, just happy and sheltered, right? So I got in all this trouble for being a Puerto Rican and bringing knives to school and scratching the chairs. So I go home that day, I start crying. I tell my parents, what happened? And I'm basically asking, because I want confirmation, like, am I a Puerto Rican? Am I a Puerto Rican? Because I need to know if I'm a Puerto Rican, because I had somehow, decided that a Puerto Rican is a bad person who does these terrible things that Sister Margaret Mary is telling me that I was doing. So as you can imagine, a whole hoopla ensued, and my parents went to the school and there was a whole thing, and I ended up moving to another Catholic school the next year. But that was the moment that, and I'm telling you, I was 5, that was the moment where I started to realize that there is something else outside of just who I am and what I am doing that contributes to what is expected of me, positively or negatively, right? That's the first real time that I understood that something exists called race or ethnicity. I didn't have those words, but there's something that exists that makes me different in some way or another from a lot of other people. And, the sad and crazy thing is I'm not even Puerto Rican. So it's like, she didn't even have her facts straight. But here I am, 40 something years in, and I remember that moment like it was 5 minutes ago.
I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing that experience. And it's interesting because in your story, here you are living these 2 different worlds, if you will, right? Let's call one world in Washington Heights, another one in Riverdale. In Washington Heights, you reference, you're living among a bunch of Dominicans, and you put on a costume that you thought people wanted you to be like, right? But then I'm wondering, in Riverdale, how did that moment influence your identity? I'm sure you didn't go into Riverdale with that same costume because you probably had that association.
No, I did because
really?
because in the 90s, that was what was hot in private school, right? Like the whole prep school gangster thing was like hot. Yeah, there was actually a story written about it in the New Yorker, an expose at the time about this whole thing of prep school gangsters and so on. So yeah, I did it. I did. I mean, my style has evolved, and I eventually was like, this just feels weird. But it was strange because it was a moment where, imagine, and I'm going to date myself, but it was like Biggie Smalls Wu-Tang Clan, like it was all this New York hip hop happening. We're in the center of it. I'm from Washington Heights. It's like everywhere. I'm commuting into Riverdale. All of the kids in the prep school are sort of into this too. They want to be part of this life or this community that they're just not a part of. It gives them some sort of cred. So there is an exchange of, there is actually an exchange of stereotypes that are happening that no one is really aware of at that age. And there's this desire to be part of something that you're not really part of in one, you know, on one hand or the other. And so, you know, it had some, it was a really strange time because it felt like everyone was trying to be like a hip hop kid, even if you weren't from Washington Heights, even if you weren't from the Bronx. It was cool. It happened to be cool until it wasn't. And that was sort of the awakening for me. It's like, this is cool until it's not, right? Until someone who you know, who's here graduates and goes off to their Ivy League education and goes on to become a banker at Goldman, and they don't have to worry about anything else. But all the folks that are actually in these communities don't do that. Yeah. You know, they're not going to graduate out of this. And so it just wasn't, it was just a really strange and sort of not full, it wasn't a very conscious moment, you know? Yeah. And a lot of growing up is developing that kind of consciousness and understanding what are the real factors that are at play here. And why is it, and for me, it was this, you know, why is it that my story is so uncomfortable for others because I don't fit a stereotype, and somehow the world wants me to fit a stereotype. And that is what's causing the tension. The tension is actually not coming from me, is what I realized. The tension is actually coming from everything around me that is saying to me, well, you are a Latina, you are from Washington Heights, you are Dominican, you are supposed to be, you know, fourth generation college, you're supposed to be, you know, a single teenage mom, you're supposed to be, you know, all the things that I'm supposed to be, that the world is saying, this is what you are, your life is supposed to be like. And I was saying, this is nothing at all what my life is like, you know? And so I didn't start to really confront that until I realized that's not an internal situation. It's a problem with the world. It's a problem with society. It's actually not a problem with how I'm being raised or with my family or anything that I had formerly attributed the tension to. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And it's interesting when you reference the like hip hop culture and like the the Catholic school gangsters. You know, I was young, but at the time I was in middle school and I went to Catholic school my entire life. And during that time, you know, you referenced the music, but something that goes along with the music, especially in that time, was the baggy clothes era. So although it's so funny because although I had to wear a uniform, it was the baggiest khakis that you have ever seen. Like, yeah, I had polo shirts, but as soon as the clock struck 3 o'clock, I untucked the polo and the polo shirt.
And it was like down to your knees.
Yeah, exactly. And then I had the bomber jacket on top, so it kind of looked like a dress with the polo shirt. And then I had the Timbs on, and it wasn't just a you couldn't wear the construction because you had to wear like in some schools you had to wear like black ones. So it had like black with like a certain color. It was a thing. And that
it was that's a New York thing. That I don't think that was a New York, like if you grew up in New York, that was what was up at that time. Which also contributed to a little bit of the internal chaos for me, because it's like, you're glorifying my neighborhood. You've never been to my neighborhood. You would never come to my neighborhood, right? You don't know anything about my neighborhood, but yet you're glorifying it because you're listening to Mobb Deep every day, like, you know, on your luxury coach bus ride up to Riverdale Country School, and like a lot of people, like you're trying to navigate what's the easiest way to get through this, right? What's the easiest way to get through this? And it was like, okay, this is the easiest way to get through it. Let me not even deal with all of these all of the tensions that I feel brewing. Let me not even deal with it, because I just want to get through this, and I want to be successful, and I want to graduate, and I want to go off to college, and so on. But I was extremely active in high school, and in terms of social activism, and I staged speak out assemblies and whatever, because there was definitely this point in time for me where I was like, this is nuts. This is all nuts. And I just am going to say that it's nuts because I believe in the truth and I love the truth. And I think the truth is the most valuable thing in a lot of situations. And it suddenly, became the case that, my identity was then tied up with conflict. My identity at the school was tied up with, this really progressive liberal point of view that was in conflict with what the school wanted the environment to pretend to be like, right? The whole kumbaya, there are no issues here. This is a racial utopia, when it was not. It was just not. There were clear issues. There was clear sort of disparity in treatment. There were some things that were just nuts that were going on that, we look at them now and it would be, it would be catastrophic, right? So I'll give you a very short example. When I was in high school, the buses for most of the kids were big Liberty lines. I don't know if those still exist, coach buses. They were full-blown luxury coach buses, with the AC in it and the puffy, fluffy seats and the whole 9 yards. There were no yellow cheese buses going to Riverdale Country School, first of all. But those buses only went, down the Upper West Side largely, and down the Upper East Side, and that's it. So if you were a student from the Bronx that actually lived in the Bronx, or took the train to school, which was, it ended up being almost just all of the students of color, of which there were not that many. The school had a separate bus for you. And that was a regular old yellow school bus. So first of all, there's this visual discrepancy where 90% of the kids are getting on these, ginormous luxury buses, and you're getting on the one yellow school bus that goes to the train station or goes to the Bronx. But to make it worse, Riverdale has this roundabout driveway, and all the buses would come in through the driveway and line up there, and all the kids would find their bus and get on the bus. All the buses except the yellow school bus. So the yellow school bus did not actually enter onto the campus or go onto the driveway at all. It was up the street, down almost on the edge of the campus where Riverdale Country School merged with Manhattan College at that time. And there was a tree all the way down the street, and you had to walk to that tree to wait for the yellow bus.
Wow.
Okay.
How did you feel at the time?
Before getting into that, let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsors.
COVID-19 moves fast, and now you can too. If you feel symptoms, even if they're mild, you should test fast. Test positive and at high risk for severe COVID-19? Then act fast with authorized oral treatments that can be taken at home and must be taken within 5 days from when symptoms begin. COVID-19 moves fast, and now you can too by asking your healthcare provider if an oral treatment is right for you. Learn about a treatment option at treatcv19.com. This message is sponsored by Pfizer.
September 8th, 2022, VMLY and R for Pfizer/Comirnaty. At ID PFCY01100000. Spot title, 30 blind date. 30 seconds, radio full mix.
Dancing crew, trip for two, nail the final interview. Game with Doug, brand new mug. Come here, kid, give me a hug. The more you want to do, the more we want to do. Boosters designed for COVID-19 variants are now available. If you've had your primary series, schedule an updated COVID-19 booster appointment as soon as you're eligible. Sponsored by Pfizer and BioNTech.
I felt nothing at the time because you normalize this kind of stuff, right? You normalize all of this stuff. I felt nothing at the time about, gathering my stuff with my friends and walking off the campus, out of sight of the bus, the bus turnaround and all, walking down the campus to the end on the street and waiting by a tree separately for a completely different bus than everybody else. I felt nothing. And the fact that I felt nothing is part of what we're talking about, right? Like it takes time for the awareness, the ability to understand and unpack that tension to set in, because even if you feel it, it's so deep down that you can't really articulate or understand it until you get to that place in maturity that comes with time, that comes with experience, to say, that was really nuts. Like that was a really crazy thing that was happening every day that we all did. And we all felt like this is just the way it is. But it sets you up to think, it sets you up subconsciously to believe that there just are different rules, to understand really how life works. There's different rules for everybody. And, the world is not fair. And here are some real life examples of things that are not fair that you have to deal with today. And that's just the way that it is, and find a way to figure it out. And that's sort of been the ethos of my life. It's not fair, and find a way to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case for a lot of us.
I'm curious if this trend of experiences that you were facing around being different and being treated differently, did that continue when you entered corporate America?
Well, I think I was very lucky in that I had a mom who was in corporate America my whole life. My mom was a CMO at a health care company in New York, and
That's amazing.
Yeah. So my mom is so amazing. Like she is really like a rock star. I love her, and I'm so proud of her.
I didn't even know she was in marketing too. Like the fact that she was a CMO too. And
yeah,
now y'all can do like,
ran,
oh my God.
My mom set up and ran the marketing function for a major New York health plan when I was growing up. And so I had a lot of privilege that a lot of folks in my community did not have, right? And I know that, and that sort of is what created a lot of the tension, because I knew that and everyone else knew that, right? Like I'm going off to private school, my mom is getting up every day and getting in her own car and driving to her, executive job, and my dad had his own business, and we traveled on vacations and we went out of the country, not just to DR, and blah blah blah. And so I know that I had a lot of privileges and a lot of other people in my community did not have, but I also didn't have the same privileges a lot of people from my other life had. So it was this odd tension of, kind of being in between two things and not really getting the full benefit of either side. So to your question, I had a lot of understanding of corporate America and business. I have a very entrepreneurial family. I grew up, in the office, going to the office with my mom when she was in healthcare, and also before her and my uncle were all involved in financial business and money wiring and et cetera. So I grew up going to the office and like being my mom's helper and like file these things here and find this receipt and get on the computer. I'm like 10 years old and I'm like, on the computer. So it was super normal to me that women are bosses, that women have careers, that women go to work, and that women, do big things and have big jobs and tell people what to do, which was the most, for me as a kid, like the biggest deal. When I grow up, I want to be a boss of everyone. That was my thing. If you ask me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be the boss of everyone, whatever that means. So I came into my professional life with a little bit, I think, of a heads up and a leg up, I think, than a lot of other of my, peers in my community or other Latinas. And I'm very, very grateful for that, because I know that's in a lot of ways, especially at that time, the exception to the rule. And nonetheless, there have been challenges and stumbles across the way. Right. Mm-hmm. There has been the persistent, again, tension of, how am I supposed to show up here versus how I really feel versus how I really, am versus, whatever, like things, very simple things like driving into the parking lot of my company, years ago, and having my hip hop music. I'm, you know, born and raised in New York. I'm hip hop all the way, right? Like having my hip hop on full blast because I'm, you know, driving up to White Plains to get to work, and I'm blasting my music. It's 8 a.m. I get into the parking lot and I lower it, right? Because I'm like, you know, I don't know what they're, you know, what I don't want folks to think that I'm unprofessional or to think that I am something other than, you know, smart and capable and polished and so on. And somehow blasting my hip hop music in the car wasn't that, right? So you're always negotiating these elements of identity. But as I've gotten older and as my career has evolved, I'm trying to get to a place where all of that is true at the same time, and it's an and strategy, not an or strategy, right? And it is a very hard thing to do. I don't succeed at it every day, but I'm so conscious, and I'm so conscious of creating that exact, ability, that space for other people of color to be able to exist in their and I am this and that and that and that and that. And to be all of those ands at once, I think when we get there, we'll be in the right place. And I'm doing everything that I can to be that, and also to create that for everyone that is around me, because that's real freedom. That's freedom.
Yo, if you are the exception these days, like in 2022, like a CMO, imagine your mom.
Oh,
that is,
I mean,
great. Like, does she tell?
I'm telling you.
And it's, I mean, for me, it's interesting, right? Because you're probably too young to even like have those type of conversations or like even know what she was going through at that time. But I'm wondering, like, now, do you say like, yo, mom, did you experience this like as a Latina?
Oh, she totally. I mean, we've talked about, yes. And not only as a Latina, but my mom has an accent. I don't know why she has an accent. That's for a whole other conversation. Like, my mom came here when she was like 5. I don't know why she has an accent. She's like really attached to this accent, you know, like it's part of her identity. She wants to have an accent, you know, because she is, you know, it's important to her. So, you know, how, not just as a Latina with an accent, how was that? And we've had conversations, and she shared some pretty outrageous things
I'm sure.
that have happened. And the unfortunate part is that it's not that different, right? Despite it being so many decades after the fact, it's not that different. I mean, I think it's a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more veiled, but it's really not all that different. It's not as different as it should be for all of the years and all of the things that we have been through as a people, as a society, as a culture, as a country. We shouldn't be dealing with a lot of the things that we're still struggling with. And that's the sad part.
What were some of the similarities that you found in your experiences? Like, when you mentioned things aren't that different, you know, I'm wondering if there were like common critiques or the shoulds of what like both of you should have been.
Well, you know, I think the idea that it's either one thing or another. As a woman, you can't be too outspoken, you can't be too strong, you can't have too much of an opinion, because you know, you are a woman executive as opposed to a man, which what the hell does that have to do with anything, right?
Right.
I don't think that's changed all that much. You know, also the concept that as a Latina, you are fiery and aggressive and, you know, in some ways scary. That really hasn't changed either. And then there's the opposite of that, which is, as a Latina, you're supposed to be so kind and sort of warm and gentle and passive. So you don't really know what side of the stereotype you're supposed to be, you know, landing on. But I don't think much of that has changed at its core. We are still, you know, all these decades later, we're still having some of these same conversations. We're still dealing with some of these same issues. These are the same types of things that you hear from others, you hear from peers and colleagues are coming up in reviews and coming up in, you know, in performance reviews and so on. And it is surprising and at the same time maddening that we have not been able to evolve. And that's not on us. I don't think that is, an issue of Latinos or Black people or brown people or people of color in general. It's the folks that are in positions of power. And it's the way that this is all created systemically. And it is the idea that, we're existing in places that were not meant for us, that were not designed for us to exist, let alone to succeed in. And there's general resistance to changing what has worked for others for so long. There's a sense of, I'm giving something up for you to have something. And that's really not the reality. That's not the reality. You're not giving anything up for someone else to have something. There's plenty for everyone, number one. And number two, you need to create organizations and businesses that reflect the country, the world, the society, the communities that you are in. And it is just, hello, look at the data, look at the demographics. There's so much richness that comes from diversity of thought, and diversity of thought comes from diversity of lived experiences. And I do wish that we were further along. And that is why I work so hard and I'm so intentional in my recruiting, in my hiring. Also, I try to be, really, really real and direct and honest and transparent in all of my interactions with everyone, regardless of level and who you are and where you sit and so on, because the lack of transparency and the lack of honesty and the lack of kind of showing up as your full self as much as that is possible is what perpetuates these systems and these beliefs and these parameters and borders that keep people in places that in some way are lesser than what they can be and what they can do and what their capacities are.
Yeah. And it's a different game or a different opportunity for you in a executive level position compared to maybe when you were in high school in Riverdale, right?
Oh yeah.
Like in Riverdale, you got certain obstacles and, maybe you led a protest or a walkout or you did all these things, but it's a different level of risk that you're taking these days because, you got a family, you got a lifestyle, it's impacting the bag, right? So yeah. I'm curious, like when you get some of this resistance or, you get some of these names like spicy or too much, to this or to that, do you feel the need to suppress parts of your identity?
No.
I'm just wondering like how do you handle that?
I don't, and I've never been good at that. So that's not my thing. Never has been my thing, never will be my thing. It's so funny because even when I think that I'm trying to tone down, I'm the only person that thinks I'm toned down. Like no one else thinks that I'm toned down. So even my understanding of what is toned down is like way off, right? So no, the answer is no. I refuse. I have worked really hard, Babel, right? I have worked really hard in my life. I know that I have been tremendously privileged. I have been tremendously blessed. I can only thank God and the universe for being born into my family, for having my parents, for having a leg up in the game that I know a lot of other people did not have. And I know that, and I do not take that for granted for a second of the day of my life. And I know that I would be doing myself and every other, brown or Black girl coming up in the ranks such a disservice by not using my seat at the table to create space. So the answer to that question is absolutely not. I have worked really hard and I have navigated through really complicated terrain my entire life. I have learned how to exist in every possible scenario that you can imagine, all the way from the wealthiest of private schools all the way down to, the poorest of neighborhoods and everything in between. I have figured out how to navigate through all of it. I have put in the work. I have, kind of been by the book, and I have created this career, again, with the help of community, with the help of God and the universe and family and my mom and, mentors and my uncle and all these people that have been instrumental in my growth. And I'm not at the place in my life where I will dim any of that to make it easy or to make myself more tolerable for someone else. Because I'm not thinking about me anymore. I'm thinking about my 3-year-old and other children that are gonna come up in the next iteration of the world. And I don't wanna be sitting at my dinner table having the same conversations with my daughter in 20 years that I heard from my mom 25 years before. That to me would be I would have accomplished nothing if that is what the world is like for my kid. And I know that's a big deal. And I know that sometimes causes friction and tension. And I'm okay with that friction and that tension because like I said from the beginning, we're all on a journey to land at authenticity. And authenticity for me is the and strategy. I am that, and I am this, and I am that, and I'm a lot of things. So yeah, I am sassy, I am fiery, I am opinionated, I am passionate, I'm also kind, I'm also fair, I'm also thoughtful, I'm also genuine, and I can go on. And it all exists at the same time. And that is what this is about. It's about finding the humanity in everyone and allowing everyone to be their full human self in all of the spaces where they exist. That's my goal.